This is the
Five Stars
podcast.
Let me talk to you.
Hi.
So, what do you guys want to talk about? Tell me when I'm telling lies.
Thanks, guys. Back to you.
Alright, guys. Got some unfortunate news I need to break here at the top of the podcast. Looks like this will be the last one. I've always prided myself on giving you all 100% effort every time I come on here to talk about wrestling. You know, the goal of this channel from the onset was always to make people smile and give them something to look forward to every week. My performance on this channel, regardless of whether you like me or hate me, the goal has always been to make people happy. And unfortunately for me, it's come to a point where I'm not even able to put a smile on my face anymore when I do this. I don't know where I'm at, but if I can't perform and have fun doing this, then to me it's not worth the effort. I'm trying to stay tough as I talk about this right now, but the only emotions running through my head are sorrow and sadness. I've lost a lot of things doing this show over the last few years, but the one thing I've truly lost in the last year is my smile. So I have to fix myself and see if I can find my smile again. So thanks for understanding, and I hope you all can find it in your heart to forgive me for leaving on such short notice. Now, see, here's the thing. Even if any of that crap I just said was true, even if there was a shred of veracity to any of that garbage I just spewed, you would still call BS on it. And rightfully so. Which is precisely the thought I had when I went back and relived the infamous Shawn Michaels I Lost My Smile promo on Retro Raw this week. Let me tell you, man, I needed a good laugh this weekend, and that Shawn promo really helped to put me in a jolly mood. That was probably the hardest I've laughed in a very long time. There is so much about that segment, especially with 30 years of retrospective framework. You go back and watch that promo in 2026. I don't even think it's a matter of me getting pissed off about it. Now it's just hilarious. It's going to be a heavy topic on today's show. There is other stuff that happened on Retro Raw. But compared to Shawn vacating the belt and doing that pitiful, emotional farewell speech, I mean, nothing else on that show truly mattered. Unless you count Rocky winning the IC belt. But we'll get to all that shortly. For the record, no, I'm not leaving. Don't unsubscribe due to poor attempts at comedy. No, we're here to stay, brother. Five Starr Wrestling Report podcast ain't going anywhere. We're here every week on YouTube and Rumble to put smiles on people's faces and try to make light of really dumb situations that happened on these retro WWF shows back in the day. The thing that I love about the Attitude Era, people my age often say, it was the best time to be a wrestling fan. And for a lot of people, That very well may be true. I grant you, it was a hell of a roller coaster ride through the late 90s. But man, oh man, there is so much bullcrap that happened from like early 97 to the end of the decade. And I'm just strictly talking WWF right now. I'm not even factoring anything that happened in WCW. I'm having fun so far. The shows are generally better, for whatever that's worth. There's still a lot of horse dung to filter through. But at least there are things that I can look forward to on a weekly basis. Especially because the year 1997 is more ingrained in my memory than anything from 93 to 96. So, well, with that said, y'all want to get into this retro Raw? More specifically, Thursday Raw. As they mentioned about 500 frickin' times in the opening Chiron package. I didn't record the audio sample this time, but it was a pretty wicked promo package. Not as funny as the Wrestle War 90 package that WCW put together, with Flair and Sting lip-syncing Wild Thing in comical fashion. This one was just a voiceover saying, Thursday, Raw, Thursday. And all the top stars are being featured in the graphics. The best was Austin. They didn't even use his name. It just said 316. In any case, let's get into it. So I mentioned Shawn's promo being the only thing of real substance on the Raw Thursday special. But this Raw also featured a major title change, which to me is still very weird in hindsight. People remember The Rock winning the Intercontinental title from Hunter, but the thing that's often neglected is how the match itself was randomly thrown together with absolutely zero build or fanfare. When you go back a week, there was no mention of this match ever taking place. They didn't put a graphic up for it. The announcers didn't plug it. We've never seen these two interact prior. So when you see Rocky come out for this match with Hunter, especially when you find out it's a title match, you're immediately thinking, okay, something's up. And I think I briefly talked about it the other week, but that might have been their intent with doing the title switch here. You knew management was high on Rocky to begin with. Hot-shotting a title change when nobody would have seen it coming. Not necessarily the worst idea. It wasn't going to be enough to turn the ratings around, but baby steps. The thing too is that if you know even the most basic of wrestling psychology, especially by the time we get to the closing 5 or so minutes here, when they're having Rocky kick out of pinfall attempts, and Vince is sitting there on commentary selling him short before the match is even over, you knew at that point Rocky was winning the title. Hunter controlled the pace for like 90% of the thing. It's the classic babyface overcomes the obstacles and pulls out the miracle of a lifetime when the odds were stacked against him. And don't get me wrong, I had virtually no complaints about anything they did here, other than Honky coming out to do commentary, which blew fucking chunks. Literally, he came out to inform everybody that he wasn't impressed with anything he was seeing in the match, and that he has a new protege, but it's neither Hunter or Rocky. So why the fuck were you out there, dude? other than to piss me off. That aside, rest of the match is fine. It wasn't a 5-star classic or anything. Again, people remember the slip on a banana peel finish with Rock small packaging Hunter at the end. I can't really argue anything before that was noteworthy in terms of spots or moments. There were some faint Rocky sucks chants in the early goings, but those quickly died out the longer the match went. Obviously, the Rock-Hunter feud becomes an extension of everything that went down here. Not immediately, but by SummerSlam next year, the Rock-Hunter program is arguably one of the more heated feuds in the company by that point. And by then, both guys have been elevated up the card, Rock in particular. And the post-match promo Rocky cut was about what I would have expected for early 97 Rocky Maivia. He was not quite the wordsmith he would become later on. It was one of those white meat vanilla I did it for dad type promos. Which is fine. Wasn't horrible. Fine start to the show. Again, you're trying to hook people in with something big at the beginning since Raw was being held on an off night. So doing a hot shot title change like this, I think it worked. Plus, getting the belt off Hunter was probably needed. His title reign was about as exciting to watch as paint drying. But that kind of goes with every Hunter title reign throughout history. So then after that, Sonny's Tits came out to introduce the next tag match. It's the official in-ring debut of the Headbangers, taking on Sparkplug, Bob Holly, and Aldo Montoya. Mosh and Thrasher, the former Flying Nuns. So in other words, a slight gimmick upgrade. They were still better than the fake race car driver and the fake Portuguese guy with a jockstrap over his face. Predictably, the fans were about as responsive for this as people at a public library. There was one single annoying fuck in the crowd doing an obnoxious cat call whistle the entire match. Beyond that, you could hear mice pissing in the rafters, it was so quiet. The match also sucked. That didn't help. The problem now is that Raw is 2 hours, so matches that should feasibly go 3 minutes or less are now being stretched to like 6 to 7, sometimes longer. There's absolutely no reason this match needed to go 6 minutes, especially with two teams the crowd didn't give a shit about and had no issues with to begin with. There was a 20-second sequence here where Bob Holly and Mosh could not get on the same page to save their lives. They fucked up a leapfrog attempt, and then for like the next 15 seconds, they get tangled up in the ropes trying to do a shoot-off spot. Looked absolutely atrocious. There was about 4 minutes of boring heat on Holly before Aldo's cold tag comeback. And then the Headbangers tried a powerbomb leg drop combo on Aldo, completely fucked it up. And then they got the 3 count. I wrote, hideous television and one of the worst debut matches I can recall in recent memory. Real talk, I don't care if y'all thought the Headbangers were cool. I thought the gimmick was fucking stupid. And I never thought Mosh or Thrasher were ever any good in the ring. I remember like 10 years ago, didn't they make a surprise cameo on like a Raw or a SmackDown? I saw some of their matches in Smoky Mountain right before it folded in 95. Never liked their work down there either. Sorry, not sorry. Just, I didn't get it. I didn't get the gimmick. I didn't get the appeal. Not my flavor of ring style. But I'm not going to get hung up on trivial matter. Let's talk about the big one. This segment you all came to hear me rant about. The Shawn Michaels I Lost My Smile speech. I alluded to some of the verbiage during the opening spiel at the top of the podcast. To say I was making light of Shawn's delivery would be probably underselling it. You know, it's one of those promos that I unfortunately remember like the back of my hand. It's kind of etched into my memory for all the wrong reasons. There's a lot to say about it. Not necessarily the promo itself, but everything that surrounds the nature of the promo. And unless you've been living under a rock, or for whatever reason you don't know the bells and whistles that led up to this particular moment, I'll go ahead and lay out the riveting details. So let's remember what the main event is for the upcoming In Your House pay-per-view. By the way, a pay-per-view that is now happening in 1 calendar week. That's the key to all this. It was one thing for Shawn to pull this little stunt, but to do it a week before the match that was supposed to determine his opponent for WrestleMania, Bret Hart. To say the timing of it was a little suspect. Can you see how that might raise some eyebrows? So again, the main event for In Your House is Bret versus Austin versus Vader versus Undertaker. Winner getting to face Shawn for the title at Mania 13. We get to the go home before the pay-per-view, only to then hear via cold open at the top of the show, Shawn Michaels is now relinquishing the WWF title due to a completely arbitrary leg injury that nobody had known about prior to, well, this Raw. Even though Shawn had never favored his leg previously, even though there was no mention from anybody in the company that Shawn was working with a bum knee at any point in time, even though there was no reason to suspect that Shawn was hurt other than word of mouth. Well, now Shawn's got a boo-boo. And not only is this very timely leg injury occurring right at the point they were about to set the stage for Bret and Shawn in the main event for WrestleMania 13 for the title, a main event, by the way, that Bret was slated to go over in, now Shawn can't fulfill those obligations. He is no longer capable of seeing the match through and dropping the belt to Bret at WrestleMania. This is now an emergency surgery situation. He has to get this problem taken care of right now. So that was always my impression of the way this all went down. Call me a skeptic. Call me a conspiracy theorist. But kind of like my conspiracy theory that Montreal was actually a very well-crafted, very well-concealed company work, as opposed to the narrative that's been presented that it was in fact a shoot. My belief is that this Shawn promo was his way of getting out of having to do the honors for Bret in a month. Not that there's any reason to question that. You know, aside from Shawn deliberately telling Bret to his face, "I will never do the job for you." But let's get out of the conspiracy bubble for a minute and talk about what actually went down in this promo. So Shawn comes out and immediately starts doing the puppy dog face. Vince starts breaking down Shawn having to vacate the title because of this knee injury he's dealing with. A knee injury that he's been dealing with for about 7 days, apparently. And so Shawn goes into this extraordinarily absurd sob story about how he's never had to deal with having a doctor tell him that he may never wrestle again, how he's always prided himself on giving the fans a good time. He's always prided himself on performing at the highest level, so whenever fans would see Shawn wrestle, they could get their money's worth. He might not be able to come back to wrestling. He's not entirely sure. The schedule's been grueling for HBK over the last year. It's taken a toll on his body in more ways than just wrestling. Oh, bear in mind, too, as he's delivering this very heartfelt, totally believable speech about a career-threatening leg injury, the idea that he may never wrestle again, the world champion of this company, the supposed top babyface, what is the crowd chanting during all of it? We want Sid. Comedy. It's as if even the fans weren't buying any of this bullshit. So he continues by saying that toughness is a word that the boys like to throw around. But Shawn doesn't have a lot of toughness in his heart right now. Only sadness, grief, and sorrow. I will say that was probably the one truthful thing that Shawn mentioned during this entire promo. Him not being tough. Now that I totally buy. And then, of course, we get the infamous line that everybody remembers, mainly because it was so preposterous. He says, I've lost a lot of things over the last several months, and one of them has been my smile. So I have to go home, fix myself, and find my smile because somewhere along the line, I lost it. I think what he meant to say here was, I've lost a lot of things over the last several months, but the biggest thing I lost was a set of balls. And because I can't be man enough to do the honors for my adversary and drop the belt like a professional, I'm going to pass it off to Gorilla Monsoon, tuck my tail between my legs, and ride off into the sunset so I can watch WrestleMania from the comfort of my own living room. And be happy that I don't have to let Bret Hart pin my shoulders to the mat. Are you starting to get the picture here? Do you get the impression that I thought this whole thing was a complete load of horse shit? And so here's the bone of contention I've always had about this. Even if you want to argue that Shawn was seriously hurt, and this supposed leg injury absolutely prevented him from being able to work WrestleMania that year, can you explain to me why he was back in 5 months doing backflips off the middle rope and working like nothing was ever wrong in the first place? Like, did he actually think we were that dumb? I saw plenty of dumb people in the crowd buying this little performance. Mainly all the teeny bopper females. They were the only ones truly saddened by this news. Everyone else, I think, collectively said, oh, thank the frig God. Get this asshat out of here as quickly as possible so we don't have to deal with this pussy ass anymore. But come on. Don't be an idiot. You all know this whole thing was a load of hot garbage. Bret Hart knew it was garbage. Can only imagine what he was thinking listening to this live in the back. Probably laughing himself into hysterics. And hey, we've talked about how this whole thing completely derailed the WrestleMania plans. You think about it, Bret winning the four-way at this point was almost completely superfluous. It's not even like he carries the belt into WrestleMania anyway. I could obviously go on for hours about this if I wanted to, but it's just another textbook example of why Shawn Michaels was one of the most insufferable pricks to deal with around this time. You can be the biggest HBK mark in the world. Fine. That's your prerogative. But don't sit there and try to convince me that this whole thing wasn't premeditated. We know that Shawn's leg injury was not as severe as he claimed it was. I'm more inclined to believe his back injury was more severe than this. And I still have my doubts about that as well. But at least Shawn was gone for well over a year following back surgery. And the leg recovery for him was what? 4 to 5 months? What's typical time recovery period for somebody post-leg surgery? Especially as an athlete. What, 6 months to a year? Maybe he'd be back in the gym training in 12 weeks. But certainly not being on the field or working at a peak performance. And the same thing would happen with Shawn. Like, if he was really that hurt, he would not have been back in the ring working the same style he was prior to surgery. You would at least see him modify his ring style. He's lucky he mastered the art of the crocodile tear. Because outside that, this whole thing came across phonier than a fucking football bat. And I will die on that vine. You will not convince me otherwise. Especially with how this all affected their WrestleMania plans. But anyway, I'll get off my soapbox now. We got a lot more junk to cover here. Savio Vega versus The Undertaker was up next. So they turned Savio heel about 2 weeks ago. Had him join up with the top heel faction in the company as of this point. So naturally, they sent him out this week to be The Undertaker's punching bag for about 8 minutes. We had a rather obscure line from JR during this match when he was talking about the Deep South. He said that the fans in the Deep South have a very good understanding about the Nation of Domination as a group. I'm sure they do, Jim. I mean, he only mentioned that to plug a few live events in places like Birmingham and Knoxville. But it was still funny. So like I said, Taker beat up Savio for almost the entire match. There was a very scary spot at the finish where I'm still not even entirely sure what happened here. There's a shoot-off spot that Savio gives Taker, and Savio hunches himself over for whatever reason. I think Taker was going to do the big diving clothesline spot. So in an effort to save it, Taker attempts to give Savio a leg drop, and this results in Taker dropping his entire body weight over Savio's back and basically bending the guy in half. So they try to recover as best they could to set up Taker putting Savio away with a choke slam. At which point, after Taker beats Savio clean, he and Ahmed single-handedly run off the entire nation by themselves. I believe it was 5 or 6 on 2 advantage heels. And they still got overpowered. I maintain everything I previously said about the Nation of Domination and their run thus far. It still sucks. So then we come back to hear Gorilla Monsoon's update about the 4-way for Sunday. He informs everyone that the match is now for the vacated WWF title. And because Sid was still owed a title shot prior to Shawn relinquishing the belt, he says that Sid will wrestle the winner of the 4-way the following night on Monday Night Raw. So at least Sid didn't get totally fucked in the equation. That was another thing I didn't mention about the promo from earlier. Remember, Shawn was originally supposed to defend the belt against Sid on this show. Can only imagine what he was thinking when he showed up at the building that day and was told, yeah, that ain't gonna happen anymore, brother. Instead, they booked him to wrestle Steve Austin, which I guess wasn't a bad substitution. It was another quasi-heel versus heel scenario, which I'm usually opposed to, especially when it's a cold match between two guys with no beef or issue at hand. So they rang the bell to start the match. Within the first minute, Austin kicks Sid in the balls right in front of the goddamn referee. Guess what wasn't a DQ? Despite Austin going low and getting the alleged heat on Sid here, he still wound up becoming the de facto babyface in the venue. There was a very funny moment here where Austin attempted to put Sid in a standing surfboard stretch. It was funny because Austin tried with every fiber of his being to get his arms locked around Sid for this hold. It did not work. And Sid began to make a very slow-paced comeback, at which point, well, Brett just nonchalantly strolled into the ring for the disqualification and began beating up Austin. I'm not even kidding you. He very calmly walked into the ring and began to attack Austin during Sid's comeback. He just walked in like he was going out to fetch the morning mail. And Sid, meanwhile, he just looks at him like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? So shockingly, Sid began to throw hands with Brett. Austin just left the ring for higher ground. This is where I pinpointed how idiotic Brett's timing was for this run-in spot. Not only did he make himself look like a fool because Austin just left the ring anyway, but then Brett found himself exchanging blows with a guy he wasn't intending on getting into a fight with in the first place. Great. I know they were building to the Raw match next week between Sid and Brett for the title. I'm not totally clueless. It doesn't mean the angle itself wasn't poorly thought through. And so, well, after they recapped the Shawn promo one final time, also a very weird ringside segment where Lawler was sending money to his mother for Valentine's Day, allegedly because she needed money to buy Lawler a gift. More bad comedy. We had Farouk and Crush versus Owen and Bulldog for the tag belts. For some reason. I repeat my previous comments about the Sid Austin match. It is two heel teams wrestling one another, which means the crowd really didn't have anybody to ultimately cheer for. I was mainly cheering for Owen and Davey to put this thing away as quickly as possible so I didn't have to watch Crush work. He did wrestle probably the best 2 minutes of his entire career when he was in there with Owen at the beginning. Naturally, it was Owen doing most of the work anyway. The Nation worked over Davey during the commercial. Came back with the heels double teaming and cheating behind the ref's back. Eventually, they went to a split screen with Brett watching on a monitor in the back. That was where he chimed in with his insight on the Shawn situation. And to his credit, he was very cordial here. There was nothing passive-aggressive about this promo, at least the way it was executed on television. I don't know. I mean, even though he was trying to remain bipartisan and wish Shawn a speedy recovery. I think deep down he was still grinning from ear to ear, calling bullshit just like everybody else. He was a pro, but even a gullible moron could see that Bret wasn't being totally authentic here. So it's more heat on Bulldog. There is a double down spot that precedes Owen's hot tag and comeback. Breaks down at the end where Davey and Farouk are fighting on one side of the ring. Meanwhile, Crush dumps Owen over the top of the floor. And they basically ran back the angle from a few weeks ago when Owen tweaked his ankle during the match with Furnace and LaFawn. Ended up costing him and Davey the match by countout. Same exact finish here. Owen can't beat the count, so the Nation win. And to keep driving the wedge further with the Owen-Davey team, the Nation lay out Davey after the match as Owen tries to climb back in to help, but his bad leg prevents him from getting back in the ring. And that part alone was great, but the icing on the cake for this entire segment, my favorite moment on Raw this week, it was subtle, but Owen was the king of subtleties. Right as he's getting Davey to aid him to the back, Owen's limping on one knee. But he had to stop Davey so he could turn around and go back to ringside to grab his slammy. Because you see, Owen's knee is really badly injured here, but not injured enough to where he would willingly leave his slammy award behind. Owen's the fucking best, dude. And so then we get our TV main event for the week. Vader versus Bret Hart. When I looked at the clock to see when this match started, there were less than 8 minutes left of airtime. So I knew they were very pressed for time here. What made it even more obvious was The Undertaker's pre-match promo where he completely broke character and didn't even try to talk with a zombie inflection. They said, "Mark, we've got just shy of 8 minutes left to get this fucking match in. Say what you need to and do it as quickly as possible." So he said, "I'll drop the gimmick and just be Mark Calloway for 30 seconds. You could hear every bit of that thick Texas accent. So Vader and Bret wrestle for about 90 seconds. They go to break just as we see Austin run into the frame to start beating up Bret. And that part in and of itself was dumb enough, especially when they come back from break and you realize Austin's gone with no explanation. What they didn't show before the commercial was Austin being lambasted by other referees and backstage personnel. So in other words, Hebner had to have seen Austin interfere before they went to break. I know I don't have to ask, but I'm going to anyway. How is that not a fucking automatic disqualification? It's not even a matter of them overlooking small details at this point. That is just outright laziness. If you're gonna book an interference spot mid-match, can you do something to at least obstruct the referee's attention? Not completely bury him and make him look like a blind bat? Christ almighty, is this shit that hard? So Vader gets about 30 seconds of heat coming back from break. Bret fired back and got Vader locked in a sharpshooter, which he broke by getting the ropes. I love this finish, by the way. So Austin reappears in the upper deck of the venue, bearing in mind that there's no visible walkway from the balcony down to ringside. This is still enough to distract Bret and cause Vader to take control. So Vader goes for a moonsault, but Brett moves out of the way. And while Austin's in the middle of smash talking Brett, you see him just crawl over and get the pin on Vader, which the camera almost missed. Who the fuck is coming up with these rotten-ass finishes? I know the answer. It's a rhetorical question. God, these finishes are so retarded. And because by that point they had virtually no airtime remaining, Brett got the pin on Vader, and within 15 seconds, they already had thrown up the end credits. Time management. They were still trying to figure out that 2-hour format change. Maybe if they didn't devote 8 minutes to that god-awful Headbangers match, that might have helped. The big takeaway from the show was fairly obvious. The irony, though, is that the most memorable thing on this Raw Thursday was something that wasn't even pre-planned. I mean, they made this huge deal about Raw Thursday for like 3 weeks. They didn't have shit planned for the card, other than Shawn versus Sid for the title, but, I mean, that was one match. You're telling me they couldn't have built up like 2 other big attraction matches for this thing? You've got a 2-hour block of time to work with, and the best you could come up with outside Rock versus Hunter for the IC title, a terrible Headbangers match, a meaningless throwaway tag title match with the Nation, an Austin Sid match that goes 3 minutes and ends in a DQ, and a Brett and Vader main event that barely goes 5? I'm sure I'm missing something else on the card. That's part of the problem. I can't remember it. What a complete waste of a Raw Thursday. But you know the old phrase. Actually, there's no phrase. I have no idea where I was going with that. There's always next time. There. That's a cliche people still use. The moral to the story is fuck Shawn Michaels. But on that note, as we all do, we have to end the show somewhere. It's probably a good place to end it right there. Flipping Shawn the big middle finger. Anyway, folks, thanks for coming back to check out the show. I don't even remember at the beginning if I plugged anything, but make sure you subscribe, comment, and leave a like for me if you have not already. And we will reconvene this coming Friday. There's going to be some possible schedule conflicts the following week. I still got to work out the details of how that's all going to go down. I'm presuming there won't be a Friday show in 2 weeks. There may not be a Monday show either. I still have to iron out some details. But I definitely will have an update by the Friday show. So there you have it. Thanks all for watching, and talk to y'all soon. Take care and peace out.